Yo, what is going on, guys, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Today I'm bringing you guys the mathematically best build for Rosaria. It is rumored that she is going to be coming back in Kazuha's banner, so I figured this would be a pretty good time to make this video, given that that's less than a week from now, I think. I actually started working on this way back when she first came out, but I stepped away from the game for a while, so here it is now. As always, I want to reiterate that the purpose of these videos is to compare the baseline values of each artifact set and weapon combinations. As such, there are no substats taking into account. All the talent levels are at level 6, Rosaria is level 90, as well as the weapons, and they are all at refinement 1. But they have their passive abilities active, meaning Homa assumes you're at half HP, Blackcliff has max stacks, etc. Rosaria also has her Ascension talent active, which gives her 12% crit rate for 5 seconds after she goes through an enemy with her E. That crit rate is in effect at all times during these DPS calculations, but in reality it would have like about a second of downtime, since it only lasts for 5 seconds. But realistically, you will almost always have it up, so just to see the ceiling of your DPS, I threw that little bit in there. As always, a link to the spreadsheets that I made are in the video description, so go ahead and check those out if you want to take a closer look for yourselves. First, let's talk about main DPS Rosaria, which can be built one of two ways. The first being Cryo, very similar to Kea, which means you would use Chongyun to convert your autos into Cryo and use a Cryo damage cup. Because you have to use Chongyun, these calculations do have the 2 Cryo resonance party buff active as well, so keep that in mind. The builds I tested for this were 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, 2-piece Blizzard, and 2-piece Glad, and 4-piece Glad. Now the reason I didn't go as far and test the other usual suspects like 4-piece Bolide or 4-piece Heart of Depths is because the difference between those and 4-piece Glad is usually that Heart of Depths is a little bit weaker than Glad, and then Ray Tracing Bolide is a little bit stronger than Glad. But because the damage difference is so drastic between Gladiator and Blizzard, I didn't even consider it worth the effort, because the bottom line is that 4-piece Blizzard versus Frozen enemies has 87,000 total damage compared to 67,000 from 4-piece Glad, aka almost 30% more damage, so it's really not worth it. In both cases, the Staff of Homa is the best in slot weapon for her out of all of the 5 stars, and as for 4 stars, Blackcliff is the clear winner, but only when you have max stacks. However, there is another thing to consider, which is Rosaria's passive. Rosaria has the ability to give her entire party 15% of her own crit rate. So if you manage to build her well, get some decent substats, and get like 60 or 70% crit rate, you use her E to get that extra 12%, you now have 82% crit rate, which means you're going to give your whole party 12% crit rate, which is really good. So Deathmatch is just as good as an option, way easier conditions to proc its optimal passive, and overall synergy with her kit. This will allow you to get to that 60 to 70% crit rate a whole lot easier, and just make her a whole lot more valuable to your team. As for free to play, this might shock you, but Crescent Pike is actually the best option, even without taking into account the bonus damage from your procs. It outdamages the Star Glitter, and its passive is way easier to get going and to keep up. Sadly, the substat is completely wasted most of the time, but it is actually the best free to play option. And I know it sounds like I'm trolling, but the numbers just do not lie. Star Glitter compared to Crescent Pike is just garbage. So in conclusion, 4-piece Blizzard Strayer is by far the best artifact set. Staff of Homa is her best 5-star, though Jade Wing is right behind it, and the best 4-star option is the Deathmatch in my personal recommendation, and the best free-to-play option is the Crescent Pike. Now let's talk about physical Rosaria. For these DPS tests, Superconduct is always in effect. The sets I tested for this were 4-piece Blizzard versus both Frozen and Cryo afflicted targets, 4-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Gladiator and 2-piece Bloodstained, 4-piece Pale Flame, and 2-piece Pale Flame and 2-piece Bloodstained. Out of all of these, 4-piece Blizzard Strayer versus Frozen enemies had the highest DPS. However, in practice, it is kind of hard to keep enemies frozen while you have an Electro unit on your team. Whether you're using Beto or using Fischl or using Lisa's ulti, they tend to break out of freeze when you hit them with Electro. So you basically can't keep most enemies frozen, and most of the bosses in the game cannot be frozen either. So unlike the Cryo build, where even if the enemies are just afflicted by Cryo, it's still way better than 4-piece Glad, here it's not the case. So when you take a look at 4-piece Blizzard versus simply Cryo afflicted enemies, it still has the highest DPS for most weapons, except for one. Yes, that's right. Crescent Pike. Crescent Pike with 4-piece Pale Flame completely leaves every other build in the dust. all the 5 stars, all other options completely obsolete. So in conclusion, if you are looking to play Rosaria for physical, just use Crescent Pike with 4-piece Pale Flame. It is so much better than anything else for physical main DPS. Now, after doing these 2 calculations, I wanted to do an actual DPS comparison, so I wanted to see how much damage you can pump out during the duration of her ulti. Now, keep in mind that this is meant for a C0 Rosaria, but I have a C2 Rosaria, so when I did these tests, I did that with that taken into account. This doesn't really change the DPS because Superconduct lasts for 12 seconds, and Chongyun's E does last long enough to where they both pop at essentially the same time if you do it in the order that I present to you in this combo. So the total damage is going to be based on C2, but the DPS is going to remain the same. So this is still relevant no matter what constellation that you have for Rosaria. Anyway, back to the actual DPS comparison. The combo that I'm going to be using for Cryo will be Rosaria E, then ult, Chongyun E, and then 4 normal attacks canceling after the slam, then another 3 normal attacks canceling into her E after the 2 pokes, and then 2 4 normal attack combos, another E, and finally 2 normal attacks. With 4-piece Blizzard and the Homa, the total DPS of this combo was 182,000. For the physical combo, it's basically the same thing, but you apply Electro first, and then you do Rosaria E, then Q, 2 normal attack 4 combos, another E, followed by 2 more normal attack 4 combos, and 1 final E, which with Staff of Homa, this combo ended up doing 143,000 damage approximately, which by itself is a lot weaker than Cryo, especially for C0. However, I then decided to test the Crescent Pike, and that same combo did almost 236,000 damage, which is absolutely absurd. Now, after seeing such a staggering difference, I went back to the Cryo build and tested the Cryo combo, but with Crescent Pike this time. So this is a Crescent Pike with a Cryo damage cup in a Chongyun E, and that total damage combo was 190,000, which is actually higher than Staff of Homa. And I don't have the words. Honestly, I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, or people are gonna call me retarded, but it's not me, okay? Look at the numbers, Mason. The bottom line is, Crescent Pike is broken, and the build that exploits it the most is physical with 4-piece Pale Flame. So if you're trying to play Rosaria for main DPS, that would be my recommendation. You can keep 100% uptime on the Pale Flame to 4-piece passive because her E cooldown is only 6 seconds, the buff lasts for 7. So as long as you're using your E off cooldown, you'll get the crit rate from your passive, you'll keep Pale Flame up, and you'll also be able to proc the elemental particles to get the Crescent Pike passive. So it just fits really perfectly. It's also very free-to-play friendly because, again, Crescent Pike is a free-to-play weapon. It's easier to set up. You don't have to take up 3 slots of your entire team like you have to do with Cryo, and it's a lot more versatile since you don't depend on freezing enemies, and for boss DPS it's a lot better because you can't freeze most of them. Now, there is one last way that you can build Rosaria, and that is as a sub DPS or as a support. The cool thing about Rosaria support is that her E actually melts on both hits, and if you build her for crit rate, she essentially gives your whole party, including your main DPS and other supports like Fischl and stuff like that, a 15% crit rate buff, which is really good. Rosaria actually has no internal cooldown on her ulti, so as long as you can apply Pyro fast enough, you can actually reverse melt every single hit of her ult. So I would recommend using her alongside Diluc, Hu Tao, or Bennett, and if you have a C6 Bennett, you can actually just use her with whoever you want, or no one at all. You could just use Rosaria herself to apply Pyro with her normals, and then the ult will melt. For these support Rosaria calculations, the weapons have their passes active, but I've tried to keep it as realistic as possible, because you're probably not going to have 3 Black Cliff stacks if you're using her as a support. And for example, 4-piece Noblesse, which is tested here, doesn't have its 20% attack buff active on the E, since you would normally E and then Q. Anyway, the sets I tested were 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Glad and 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop and 2-piece Noblesse, 4-piece Noblesse, and 4-piece Lava Walker. Now, out of all of these, the build with the highest non-melt damage was 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse. So if you plan to use Rosaria as a support for a non-pyro unit, or for example, if you have C6 Rosaria and you want to use her as a support for Eula, because her C6 gives physical damage resistance shred, this is the best bet for you. 2-piece Blizzard, 2-piece Noblesse. But for some reverse melt goodness, the best setup was 2-piece Wanderers with 2-piece Noblesse. And on all of these, Staff of Homa was her best in slot 5-star, Dragon's Bane is the best in slot 4-star for melt comps, and Deathmatch was the best non-melt 4-star. For free-to-play, sadly, all you have is Prototype Star Glitter, which is unfortunately pretty garbage, so if you're looking to use her as a support and you are free-to-play, Oof, it is looking kind of rough, to be honest. I would recommend rolling on a weapon banner that has maybe Homa or at least Dragon's Bane. That would be pretty nice, but at least Star Glitter does give you energy recharge, so you are going to be a pretty decent battery if you have that on or if you use her in any sort of comp where you're causing a bunch of reactions. And that's it, guys. That's the ultimate compendium of Rosaria knowledge. I didn't want to believe what I found, but sometimes that's life. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. This takes a lot of time and effort to make, so I would really appreciate it. And thank you to all my patrons for the continued support. And be sure to join my Discord for fun stuff and private streams. And I'll catch you all guys in the next one. Take care.